How to Speak So People Listen, Even Your Enemies by Alexander Reed. Published by Audiobooks Hub. Introduction. Most people believe that speaking well is about choosing the right words, memorizing powerful quotes, or rehearsing endlessly in front of a mirror. But that's only the surface. The true art of speaking, the kind that compels attention even from those who dislike you, is not about performance. It's about connection, perception, and control. It's about understanding the invisible threads that run between you and your listener, and learning how to pull them with care and precision. Think about the last time you felt completely ignored. Maybe you were making a suggestion at work, offering an idea in class, or explaining something to a friend, and you saw their eyes drift, their mind wander. That stings. Now imagine the opposite. You're speaking and even the person most opposed to you can't look away. They may disagree with you, but they are listening, fully present. That power isn't magic, it's a learnable skill. This book is about that skill. Over the years, psychologists, negotiators, and great leaders have discovered patterns, techniques that work not just on friendly audiences but also on skeptics and adversaries. These methods don't rely on manipulation or trickery. They rely on a deep understanding of human attention, emotion, and trust. And they can be practiced by anyone willing to learn. In the following pages, you'll discover 10 techniques that transform ordinary speech into irresistible communication. Each technique will show you how to adjust your voice, your timing, your choice of words, and even your silence so that people stay engaged, even when they're inclined to resist you. We'll explore how to build credibility instantly, how to frame your message so it's harder to reject, and how to use tension to your advantage without being confrontational. You'll see how the greatest communicators, from historical figures to modern leaders, employ these principles to win over crowds and individuals alike. But this is not just a book of tips. It's a journey into the psychology of attention and influence. By the time you finish, you won't just know how to speak better. You'll understand what's happening in the minds of your listeners, why certain phrases or pauses land powerfully, and how to protect your own energy while speaking to difficult people. You'll gain the ability to command a room without raising your voice, and to make your message resonate long after you've stopped talking. It all starts with a shift in mindset. Stop trying to impress people. Start trying to involve them. When you speak to be heard rather than to be admired, you open the door to real influence. Even your enemies can't resist a message that feels relevant, respectful, and compelling. In the next chapter, we'll begin with the foundation, the first technique that separates speakers who are ignored from those who are heard every time. If you're ready to transform the way you communicate. Chapter 1. The first and most important technique for making people listen, even those who dislike you, is to establish credibility before you say anything meaningful. Credibility is not about having a fancy title or years of experience. It's about convincing your listener, in the very first moments, that you are worth their attention. Without credibility, even the most brilliant ideas evaporate in the air. With it, even simple statements carry weight. Why do some people command silence when they walk into a room while others have to fight to be heard? It's not luck. It's the subtle signals they give off, signals that say, "I know what I'm talking about and you should hear this." These signals aren't aggressive or arrogant. They're quiet but undeniable, and they can be learned. The first step is to understand what credibility looks like from the listener's point of view. People decide within seconds whether you're credible, and they do it mostly unconsciously. They're not analyzing your resume. They're reading your posture, your tone, your facial expressions, and your first few words. If your body language is closed or hesitant, or if your opening sounds apologetic or rambling, you've already lost part of your audience, even before you've made your point. Imagine you're addressing a hostile group, coworkers who resisted your idea, or a community that doesn't trust outsiders. If you begin with a defensive tone, I know some of you may not like this, but you confirm their skepticism. Instead, start with calm, unhurried confidence. Stand or sit upright. Breathe deeply. Look at them as though you already belong. Your physical presence is your first message. Then, in your first sentences, give them a reason to believe you. This isn't about bragging. It's about relevance. People listen when they sense you have information or insight that matters to them. If you're a manager, you might open with, "I've been studying the results from the past quarter and noticed something that affects all of us." If you're an outsider, you might say, "I've worked with 3 organizations facing the same challenge you're facing now." You're not showing off, you're signaling that your words will be valuable. Another aspect of credibility is transparency. People mistrust those who hide their intentions. If you're speaking to an unfriendly audience, state your purpose clearly. "I'm here to share some ideas about how we can solve this problem together," works better than a vague or manipulative opening. Even adversaries respect someone who is upfront. Tone of voice matters just as much. A calm, steady tone suggests control and confidence. Speaking too fast or too loud signals nervousness or aggression. Slow down. Let pauses happen. Pauses are powerful. They give weight to your words and show you're not desperate for approval. They also give your listeners time to process what you're saying instead of preparing their rebuttal. Credibility also involves acknowledging the listener's perspective. When you show that you understand their concerns, even if you disagree, you lower their defenses. For example, "I know many of you are skeptical about this proposal, and that's understandable. Here's why I believe it's worth your attention." This simple acknowledgement makes you seem fair-minded rather than combative. Practice this technique in low-stakes situations first. When you enter a meeting, resist the urge to speak immediately. Take a breath, look around, and then speak deliberately. When you introduce yourself to someone new, state your name and purpose with clarity. Over time, this becomes a habit. People will begin to associate you with authority even before you speak. One of the great secrets of public speaking is that credibility is contagious. When you project it, people start to feel it themselves. If she's speaking this calmly and confidently, maybe what she's saying really matters. This effect works even on adversaries. They may not like you, but they'll respect the steadiness of your presence. And respect is the gateway to listening. By mastering credibility as your first technique, you lay the foundation for all the others. Without it, every other tactic in this book will be weaker. With it, even your boldest ideas will land more smoothly. In the next chapter, we'll explore a second technique, how to frame your message so it feels impossible to ignore. Chapter 2. Once you've established credibility, the next essential technique is framing your message so that it feels impossible to ignore. Framing is how you position what you're about to say so that it hits your audience where they live, their interests, fears, hopes, and priorities. If credibility makes them willing to hear you, framing makes them eager. Most people deliver their ideas from their own point of view. They say what they want to say the way they want to say it. But people listen when they feel the message is already about them. Framing flips the focus. It answers the silent question in every listener's mind, "Why should I care?" Think of a lawyer speaking to a jury. The lawyer doesn't start with technicalities or legal jargon. They start with a story, a context that frames the facts in a way the jury can grasp emotionally. You can do the same, even in everyday conversations. The difference between "here's my proposal" and "here's how this will solve your biggest problem" is huge. One is about you. The other is about them. When dealing with skeptics or opponents, framing becomes even more powerful. People expect you to push your agenda. When you begin instead by acknowledging their needs or fears, you surprise them and lower resistance. For example, "I understand why this change worries many of you. Let me show you how it actually protects your interests." This isn't manipulation, it's relevance. The key to effective framing is research and empathy. Before you speak, think about what matters most to your audience. What do they value? What are they afraid of losing? What would make their lives easier? Once you know, you can position your message as the bridge between where they are and where they want to be. Storytelling is one of the strongest tools for framing. Facts alone rarely move people. Stories shape facts into meaning. A short, vivid example at the start of your message can pull listeners in, even when they're skeptical. If you're introducing a new policy, instead of launching into bullet points, open with a real-life scenario. Imagine walking into work and finding your biggest headache solved. Now you've framed the policy as a relief, not a burden. Framing also involves choice of language. Words are not neutral, they carry emotional weight. The difference between "we have to cut costs" and "we're investing in our future by spending smarter" changes the entire mood of a discussion. When you choose words that align with your listeners' values, you guide their perception without heavy-handed persuasion. Another subtle aspect of framing is timing. If you're entering a heated room, launching straight into your key points might fail. Sometimes you must frame the conversation itself before presenting the content. For instance, "I know this topic is sensitive, but my goal is not to impose. I want to explore solutions together." That single sentence reframes you from an adversary to a collaborator. Practice framing by rewriting your own statements. Take a point you often make and express it 3 different ways, each tailored to a different audience. Notice how your message feels more powerful when it matches their priorities instead of yours. This exercise sharpens your instinct for audience-focused speaking. Even silence can be a framing device. A brief pause before your main point signals importance, much like a drum roll before a reveal. It primes the listener to lean in. When done calmly and confidently, these micro-moments build anticipation and attention. Framing is not about spinning or sugarcoating. It's about guiding attention to the heart of your message, the part that matters to your listener. Done well, it turns potential resistance into curiosity. People stop thinking, "I don't want to hear this," and start thinking, "I wonder where this is going." Combine credibility from the previous chapter with framing from this one, and you'll notice a shift. Your words will feel less like a broadcast and more like a dialogue. Even your toughest audience members will sense you're speaking to them, not at them. That's when they start to listen, even if they're not ready to agree. In the next chapter, we'll move deeper into the psychology of attention with a 3rd technique, using tension and curiosity to keep listeners hooked without feeling manipulated. Chapter 3. If credibility opens the door and framing draws people in, the 3rd technique keeps them from drifting away, using tension and curiosity to hold their attention. Without tension, even a well-framed message can feel flat. Without curiosity, your listeners' minds start to wander. But when you create just enough of both, people lean forward. They can't help but want to know what's coming next, even your critics. Think about a good movie or book. The story rarely begins with the resolution. It starts with a question, a problem, or a mystery. That question pulls you along until you get the answer. Great speakers do the same. They don't dump all their information at once. They release it strategically, creating little gaps that the listener's mind wants to fill. You've experienced this yourself. A speaker says something like, "There's one simple mistake almost everyone makes in negotiations," and then pauses. In that pause, your brain lights up. You want the answer. That's curiosity at work. It's not a gimmick. It's a fundamental part of how human attention works. Tension doesn't mean aggression or conflict. It means an unresolved element, a problem to solve, a risk to avoid, an opportunity to seize. When you open with tension, you give your listeners a reason to stay engaged. For example, "Our company is on track to lose a major client unless we act fast. Here's how we can turn it around." The stakes are clear. People are compelled to listen because they care about the outcome. There are several ways to build this kind of healthy tension. Ask an intriguing question. Start with something they can't answer immediately. What if everything you thought you knew about this process was wrong? Begin with a surprising fact or statistic. 90% of teams fail at this, and here's why. Use a story with an unfinished ending. 2 years ago, a colleague of mine faced the exact challenge you're facing now. What happened next changed everything. Each of these creates a small mental itch. Your listener wants to scratch it by paying attention. Another part of curiosity is pacing. If you give away your conclusion too early, you lose the pull. Instead, guide your listeners through your reasoning step by step, like walking them down a path. Each step should feel necessary, each piece of information building toward the next. This is especially important with skeptical audiences. When they feel they're solving the puzzle alongside you, they become invested rather than resistant. Voice and timing matter here too. A well-placed pause can heighten tension better than any dramatic phrase. After presenting a problem or a striking statement, stop speaking for a moment. Let silence work. People's attention spikes during silence because they expect something important to follow. You can also use contrast to create tension. Present two opposing ideas and hold them side by side. We all want freedom, but we also want security. How do we balance the two? This makes your listeners' minds work, which increases engagement. They're no longer passive, they're mentally participating. But be careful. Too much tension without release creates anxiety and pushback. Always resolve what you set up. If you open with a scary statistic, show them the solution. If you pose a question, give them the answer. Curiosity works because people trust you'll satisfy it. When you do, their respect for you deepens. This technique is especially powerful when speaking to adversaries. Enemies often come with their own preloaded counterarguments. But curiosity short-circuits defensiveness. When you pose a question or hint at an unexpected insight, their brains momentarily stop rehearsing objections and start wanting the next piece. In that small window, you can plant your key message. Practice by rewriting your openings to include a hook, a question, a tension point, or a story seed. Practice pausing just after you introduce it. Then notice how the energy in the room changes. People who were distracted suddenly make eye contact. Even the ones who don't like you lean in a little. That's the power of tension and curiosity. When you combine this third technique with the first two, credibility and framing, you're no longer just a speaker delivering content. You're a guide leading your listeners through an experience. They follow not because they have to, but because they want to know what happens next. In the next chapter, we'll move into a fourth technique, mastering the power of your voice and silence to project authority without aggression. Chapter 4. If credibility makes people trust you, framing makes them care, and tension makes them curious, the fourth technique gives your words power, mastering your voice and silence. The human voice is not just a tool for transmitting information. It's an instrument that shapes how your message is felt. The wrong tone can sabotage even the strongest arguments. The right tone can make a simple sentence feel unforgettable. Most of us speak on autopilot. We think about what we're going to say, but rarely about how we're going to sound. Yet research on persuasion shows that tone, pace, and rhythm often carry more weight than content, especially when your audience is skeptical or hostile. People decide if they like and believe you largely by how you sound. The first element is pace. Nervous speakers rush. They cram their words together as if to get it over with. But rapid speech reads as insecurity or desperation, and it gives listeners no time to absorb your message. Slow down. Give each idea its own space. When you slow your pace, you project calm authority and give your listeners a chance to think. Even your enemies will unconsciously match your tempo and become less reactive. Volume matters too. Shouting or pushing your voice triggers defensiveness. Speaking too softly signals timidity. The sweet spot is a natural, steady voice with controlled emphasis on key words. Think of how a good storyteller leans in at the right moment, lowers their voice to draw you close, then lifts it for impact. Volume becomes a dynamic tool rather than a blunt weapon. Pitch is another subtle but powerful cue. High, tense voices suggest anxiety. Low, steady voices suggest confidence. This doesn't mean you need to force an unnatural tone. It means relaxing your breath and your throat so your natural voice can resonate. A simple exercise. Before speaking, take 2 slow, deep breaths, letting your shoulders drop. This grounds your voice and calms your nervous system. Perhaps the most underused element of powerful speaking is silence. Most people treat silence as a mistake to be filled. Great speakers treat it as punctuation. A brief pause before an important point signals weight. A pause after an important point gives the audience time to absorb it. Pauses also stop you from using filler words, that weaken authority. When you can stand comfortably in silence, you project composure that even adversaries respect. Silence can also create intimacy. When you ask a question and pause, people feel compelled to fill the space, either by answering or by leaning in. In high-stakes conversations, that small shift can open doors that were closed. Silence makes you less predictable, which disrupts the patterns of an opponent expecting a standard argument. Another part of voice mastery is rhythm. Good rhythm keeps listeners from zoning out. Vary your sentence lengths. Mix short, punchy lines with longer, flowing ones. This creates a sense of movement and keeps attention alive. It also gives your ideas a kind of music that the brain finds easier to remember. Practicing these elements may feel strange at first, but it quickly becomes natural. Record yourself speaking and listen back. Notice where you speed up, where you're flat, where you forget to pause. Experiment with lowering your volume instead of raising it to command attention. Practice delivering the same sentence 3 different ways, slower, with more pauses, with different emphasis, and see which version feels strongest. Your voice and your silence are especially powerful with hostile listeners. They're looking for signs of weakness or aggression. When you stay calm, measured, and deliberate, you signal that you're not rattled by their resistance. They may still disagree with you, but they'll feel your steadiness, and that steadiness is magnetic. When combined with credibility, framing, and curiosity, voice mastery turns your presence into a force. You're no longer just someone speaking, you're someone others can't ignore. Your words carry weight, and your silence carries meaning. This is how leaders speak. This is how even enemies begin to listen. In the next chapter, we'll explore the 5th technique, how to make your message stick in the listener's mind long after you've stopped talking. Chapter 5. A message that captures attention but quickly fades is like a spark without a flame. The 5th technique is making your words stick, embedding your message so deeply in people's minds that they carry it with them long after the conversation ends. When you master this, even your opponents will find themselves repeating your ideas, sometimes without realizing it. Why do some phrases, slogans, or speeches become unforgettable while others disappear instantly? It's rarely about complexity. In fact, the stickiest messages are usually simple, concrete, and emotionally charged. They feel easy to grasp, easy to picture, and easy to share. Your job as a speaker is not just to inform but to plant images and feelings that will linger. The first element of stickiness is simplicity. Strip your message down to its essence. A single clear idea beats 5 competing points. People can't remember a cloud of information, they remember a spark. Ask yourself, if my audience remembers only one sentence, which one should it be? Then craft that sentence so it stands alone. It becomes your anchor phrase, a memorable, repeatable line that encapsulates your message. Next is concreteness. Abstract language slips through the mind. Concrete language sticks. We must improve efficiency is abstract. We're wasting 2 hours every day that we could be spending with customers is concrete. Concrete ideas can be visualized, which is why they're remembered. Whenever possible, give your audience a picture, a number, or a sensory detail. A third element is emotion. People forget facts but remember feelings. If your message makes them feel relieved, inspired, outraged, or hopeful, it will lodge deeper in memory. This doesn't mean manipulating their feelings. It means connecting your idea to something they genuinely care about. Even an adversary remembers the speaker who spoke to their deeper concerns, not just their surface objections. Another powerful tool for memorability is repetition with variation. People need to hear something more than once to retain it, but not in exactly the same way each time. Say your anchor phrase early, reinforce it in the middle with a story or metaphor, and close with it again in slightly different words. This weaves the idea into the fabric of the conversation without sounding robotic. Stories are memory's best friend. A well-chosen story turns your message from an instruction into an experience. Instead of saying, "Collaboration is important," tell a brief story about two rivals who achieved something great only by working together. Stories engage multiple parts of the brain: language, sensory, emotional, and that makes them stickier than bare facts. You can also use contrast to make an idea stand out. Show the before and after, the cost of ignoring your message versus the benefit of acting on it. This creates a mental snapshot of change. People remember contrasts more easily than steady states. When speaking to hostile listeners, memorability becomes even more important. They may resist your point in the moment, but if your phrase, story, or image is strong enough, it will echo later when their defenses are down. Sometimes the seed you plant during a tough conversation blooms weeks later. That's why sticking power matters. Practice by crafting signature lines for your main ideas, short, vivid, repeatable phrases. Test them on friends or colleagues. Ask them what they remember a day later. Refine until your core message emerges clean and memorable. The goal isn't clever slogans, but clarity that endures. When you combine this fifth technique with the previous ones, your communication transforms. You're not just grabbing attention and holding it, you're imprinting your ideas on people's minds. They'll carry your words into their meetings, their homes, even their arguments. That's real influence. In the next chapter, we'll move to the sixth technique, reading the room, how to sense and adapt to your audience in real time so your message always lands where it should. Chapter 6. If you've built credibility, framed your message, sparked curiosity, mastered your voice, and made your ideas stick, you're already ahead of most speakers. But there's a sixth technique that turns a good communicator into an agile one: reading the room and adapting in real time. No matter how well prepared your speech or conversation is, it lives and breathes inside the people who are hearing it. If you can sense their energy, emotions, and attention, and adjust accordingly, you become almost impossible to ignore, even for those who came ready to resist. Many speakers think of communication as a one-way act. I speak, you listen. In reality, it's a dance. Your listeners are constantly giving you feedback through their eyes, posture, silence, murmurs, or even the way they hold their phones. Great communicators don't just push out their message. They scan the room like radar, looking for signals, and then pivot as needed. The first step is awareness. Before you even start speaking, notice the mood in the room. Are people restless? Curious? Tired? Defensive? This will influence your opening. A restless audience might need a quick hook or an unexpected story. A tired group might need a calm, steady tone. A defensive group might need a disarming acknowledgement of their concerns before anything else. As you speak, watch for micro-reactions. A nod, a frown, a lean forward, a glance at a watch. These are data points. They're telling you whether your message is landing or bouncing off. If you see confusion, slow down or clarify. If you sense excitement, lean into that energy and expand. If you notice tension rising, lower your volume, pause, or reframe your point to show empathy. Another part of reading the room is listening while you speak. This may sound strange, but it's about listening to silence. Is it a heavy silence full of skepticism? A curious silence? A bored silence? Each one feels different. With practice, you can sense these nuances and respond. Sometimes you'll even interrupt your planned flow to ask a question. I sense some hesitation. What's on your mind? This signals respect and keeps your listeners engaged. Body language is your second set of ears. People's bodies reveal what their words conceal. Crossed arms, turned away torsos, clenched jaws, all may signal resistance. Relaxed postures, leaning in, or mirroring your gestures usually signal openness. Adjusting your delivery in response doesn't make you weak, it makes you responsive. It shows you're speaking with, not at, your audience. For hostile listeners, reading the room is especially crucial. If you sense hostility spiking, resist the instinct to speed up or push harder. Slow down instead. Acknowledge the emotion without conceding your point. I can see this topic stirs strong feelings. Let's take a breath and look at it from another angle. This diffuses tension and buys you space to continue. One powerful way to read and adapt is to ask small, low-stakes questions throughout your talk. Does this sound familiar? How many of you have experienced this? Show me by a quick nod. Does this resonate? Even hostile groups often respond physically, and those signals help you steer. Reading the room also means knowing when to change your format. If your planned speech is too long and you sense a tension fading, cut to the heart of your message. If your prepared story isn't landing, switch to a question or an example from the room. Flexibility builds credibility. People respect someone who can shift without losing composure. This technique takes practice, but it's learnable. Start small. In your next meeting or conversation, deliberately watch for signs of engagement or disengagement. Adjust your pace or tone once, just to see the effect. Over time, you'll develop an instinct for it, like a musician feeling the audience's rhythm. When combined with the first 5 techniques, reading the room makes you feel almost prophetic. You'll sense shifts before they become problems. You'll notice opportunities before they're obvious. And even adversaries will feel that you get them, which lowers resistance and heightens respect. In the next chapter, we'll build on this skill with a 7th technique, transforming conflict into connection, how to respond to pushback in a way that keeps people listening instead of shutting down. Chapter 7. By now you've learned how to earn attention, frame your message, spark curiosity, use your voice, make ideas stick, and read the room. The 7th technique takes you into one of the most difficult and most rewarding skills of all, transforming conflict into connection. This is about how you handle pushback, disagreement, or outright hostility in a way that keeps people listening rather than shutting you out. When you master this, even your enemies start to see you differently. Most people instinctively fight or flee when confronted. They either push harder, raising their voice and defending every point, or they back off, becoming timid or evasive. Both reactions make listeners stop listening. Pushing hard makes them defensive. Retreating makes them dismissive. There's a third option: stay steady, acknowledge the conflict, and turn it into a bridge. The first step is emotional self-control. Before you can transform conflict, you have to manage your own reaction. Hostile energy is contagious. If you let someone's anger pull you into a fight, you've lost the moment. Breathe. Slow your speech. Lower your volume slightly. This signals that you're not a threat and that you're not rattled. Calmness in the face of tension draws attention more powerfully than any argument. Next, acknowledge without surrendering. People often just want to be seen. If you ignore their objection, they escalate. If you acknowledge it, they relax, even if you don't agree. A simple phrase like, "I hear your concern," or "That's a valid question," creates a pause in the conflict. In that pause, you can continue. You're not conceding, you're showing respect. Another tool is reframing the disagreement. Instead of viewing it as you versus them, frame it as both of you versus the problem. We're clearly seeing this issue differently. Let's step back and look at what we're both trying to achieve. This shifts the dynamic from adversarial to collaborative, even if just for a moment. Use questions instead of statements. When someone pushes back, resist the urge to immediately counter. Ask them to elaborate. "Can you tell me more about what worries you?" This does 2 things. It gives you information about their real concerns, and it buys time to think. It also subtly shifts control of the conversation to you because you're guiding the flow. Keep your body language open. Even small gestures, uncrossing your arms, turning your shoulders toward the speaker, nodding as they talk, signal that you're not closed off. These signals lower the temperature of the exchange. People mirror the energy they see. If you stay open, many will unconsciously soften. Another powerful technique is finding common ground quickly. Even in a heated disagreement, there's usually something you both want. Name it out loud. We both care about the success of this project. We both want to avoid unnecessary risks. This small point of agreement gives you a foundation to build on. From there, your message is easier to deliver. When you respond, speak to their values, not just your facts. Facts bounce off when emotions are high. Values slip in. If someone values security, show how your idea enhances it. If they value fairness, show how your idea supports fairness. This keeps them listening even while disagreeing. Transforming conflict into connection doesn't mean you'll always win people over in the moment. Sometimes they'll still reject your point, but they'll remember how you handled it, with steadiness, respect, and clarity. Over time, that memory becomes influence. People listen more closely to those who treated them well under pressure. Practice this skill in low-stakes settings. When someone interrupts you or challenges a minor point, instead of snapping back or shutting down, try acknowledging, questioning, and reframing. Notice how the energy shifts. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes in high-stakes situations. When combined with the first 6 techniques, this 7th one turns you into a communicator who seems unflappable. You don't just deliver messages, you navigate emotions. Even adversaries feel drawn in because you've shown you're not their enemy, you're someone worth listening to. In the next chapter, we'll move to the 8th technique, how to use nonverbal cues and physical presence to amplify your words and make your listeners feel your message as much as hear it. Chapter 8. By now, you've built a reputation as someone who speaks with clarity, frames ideas well, sparks curiosity, makes messages stick, reads the room, and even transforms conflict into connection. But there's another layer that can make or break your impact: nonverbal communication. The 8th technique is about harnessing your body language and physical presence so that your words land with maximum power. People don't just hear you, they see you. Before you even open your mouth, they're already making judgments about your confidence, credibility, and approachability. A strong, calm presence can amplify your message more than an extra paragraph of explanation ever could. Conversely, poor posture, restless hands, or a weak stance can undermine even the most brilliant ideas. The first step is posture. Stand tall, feet grounded about shoulder width apart, shoulders back but relaxed. This stance projects stability and confidence without aggression. It also helps your breathing, which makes your voice steadier and stronger. When sitting, avoid collapsing into your chair. Sit upright, leaning slightly forward when you want to emphasize engagement. Next is eye contact. It's one of the simplest, most powerful nonverbal cues. Too little and you seem evasive. Too much and you seem intimidating. The sweet spot is to connect with one person at a time for a sentence or two, then shift to another. This makes your audience feel you're speaking directly to them, not at them. Your hands are also critical. People instinctively trust visible hands. Keep them where people can see them, waist level or slightly higher. Use purposeful gestures that illustrate your points, counting on fingers, showing size, framing space, rather than random waving. Still hands signal control. Sharp, well-timed gestures signal emphasis. Facial expressions are your emotional amplifier. A neutral face when discussing something exciting will confuse people. A warm smile or a subtle nod can instantly make you more relatable. Even when you're serious, a relaxed expression, not frowning or scowling, keeps the audience receptive. Then there's movement. Movement can energize, but it must be intentional. Pacing nervously back and forth drains authority. Moving deliberately to different spots of the stage or room creates a sense of inclusion. Step closer when you want intimacy, step back to give space for reflection. Pause in place when delivering your key point. This anchors the message. Another overlooked element is how you use objects in space. Avoid hiding behind podiums or crossing your arms over notes. If you must have notes, glance at them sparingly, then re-engage your audience. Open space between you and your listeners invites connection. Closed space or barriers signal defensiveness. Your appearance also communicates before you speak. This isn't about expensive clothes, it's about congruence. Dress in a way that matches the occasion but signals respect. Even small touches, neat grooming, clean shoes, subtle colors, affect how seriously your message is taken. Finally, coordinate your voice with your body. When your body is relaxed but strong, your voice naturally deepens and slows, giving you a more authoritative tone. Practice speaking while maintaining your stance, gestures, and eye contact. The harmony between your words and your body language creates credibility that feels effortless to your audience. When you master this 8th technique, you'll notice a shift. People start responding before you speak. They lean in, they nod, they mirror your gestures. Your physical presence primes them to accept your message even before the first word leaves your mouth. In the next chapter, we'll dive into the 9th technique, how to use storytelling not just as a tool for entertainment, but as a strategic weapon to persuade, teach, and inspire. Chapter 9. People may argue with your points, challenge your data, or dismiss your logic, but they rarely forget a story. That's why the 9th technique is learning to use storytelling not just to entertain, but to persuade, teach, and inspire even the most resistant audience. Stories bypass intellectual defenses and go straight to the emotional core. When you tell a story, you're not just giving information, you're creating an experience. The listener sees what you see, feels what you feel, and imagines themselves in the scene. In that moment, you're not opponents but fellow travelers in a narrative. That's how ideas slip past resistance. A powerful story doesn't have to be long or dramatic. It can be a simple anecdote about a conversation with a client, a lesson from your childhood, or a turning point in your work. What matters is that it follows a clear arc, a beginning that sets the scene, a challenge or conflict, and a resolution that delivers your message. Even a 30-second story can have this structure. To make your stories memorable, use specific details. Instead of saying a colleague, name them, or at least describe them vividly. Instead of a problem, show what it looked like, sounded like, or felt like. Details make the scene real in the listener's mind. Real scenes build empathy, empathy softens resistance. Also, choose stories that illustrate your core point rather than wandering off. Every story you tell should do one of 3 things: clarify a principle, show what's at stake, or model the behavior you're advocating. Otherwise, it risks becoming a distraction. Ask yourself, what do I want my listener to think or feel after this story? Then build it backward. Another powerful element is relatability. A story about your own mistake can be more persuasive than a story about your triumphs. It shows vulnerability, which builds trust. Even with adversaries, vulnerability signals authenticity and lowers their guard. If you can show how you once misunderstood or resisted the very idea you're now presenting, it helps them see themselves in you. Timing also matters. A well-placed story can open a conversation, shift a tense moment, or seal an argument. For example, if someone challenges your credibility, you can respond not with a counterattack but with a story that demonstrates your experience in action. That gives them something harder to argue with than a list of credentials. Your delivery shapes the impact of your story. Slow down slightly, vary your tone, and let pauses do their work at key moments. Paint the scene with your voice as well as your words. And don't rush to the moral, give your audience space to connect the dots themselves. When people draw their own conclusions, they adopt your message as their own. Finally, practice your core stories until they become second nature. Have a library, of a few versatile stories you can adapt to different audiences and situations. The best communicators aren't making up new stories on the spot. They're selecting the right one from a well-rehearsed set. When you master storytelling, you're no longer just speaking at people. You're guiding them on a journey they can feel. Even your harshest critic can't help but step into the narrative for a moment. And in that moment, you have influence. In the next chapter, we'll move to the 10th technique, how to frame your ideas as mutual wins, so that even those who oppose you feel drawn to say yes. Chapter 10. By now, you've learned how to command attention, frame your ideas, spark curiosity, use your voice and body, make messages stick, read the room, handle conflict, and tell compelling stories. The 10th and final technique focuses on a skill that can turn even your toughest critics into allies, framing your ideas as mutual wins. When people feel they benefit from your message, resistance melts, and listening turns into agreement. Humans are wired to avoid loss and seek gain. If you present your idea as a one-sided advantage, your gain at their expense, people instinctively push back. Even if your idea is objectively superior, framing it as a shared win changes the psychology. Suddenly, listeners are not opponents but collaborators in a joint opportunity. The first step is to identify overlapping interests. Before speaking, ask yourself, what do both parties want? What outcomes align? Even in a hostile meeting, there's usually at least one point of overlap. Name it up front. We both want the project to succeed, or we're both trying to reduce costs without harming quality. These statements signal collaboration, not confrontation. Next, highlight benefits for the listener. People listen more closely when they perceive value for themselves. If your suggestion improves efficiency, reduces stress, increases recognition, or protects their priorities, emphasize that. But do it authentically. Exaggeration erodes trust. Your goal is to help them see, in concrete terms, how agreeing serves them too. A subtle but powerful tactic is use of inclusive language. Words like we, us, and together create a sense of shared purpose. Contrast this with I and you, which creates separations and subtly signal competition. Saying, together we can address this challenge feels collaborative. Saying, I think you should do this, feels controlling. Another approach is showing respect for their position while proposing your solution. Instead of dismissing objections, integrate them into your framing. I understand the concern about budget constraints. Here's a way we can achieve our goals without exceeding limits. By acknowledging their priorities, you show that your solution is not a threat but a bridge. Visual metaphors or analogies can also reinforce the win-win perspective. For instance, describing a collaborative strategy as two rivers converging to generate greater flow helps listeners picture the mutual benefit. Concrete mental images strengthen understanding and retention. Even when conflict is strong, mutual wins work because they tap into a basic human desire to feel smart and reasonable. If agreeing with you doesn't require losing face or conceding a principle, resistance drops. Framing your idea as a joint success allows even adversaries to nod and say yes without feeling defeated. Practice by reframing everyday suggestions. Instead of presenting your proposal as your idea, present it as a way you can solve a shared problem together. Over time, this becomes a habit that transforms your interactions. Meetings, negotiations, or casual conversations become arenas for influence rather than argument. When combined with all 9 previous techniques, this 10th skill gives you unmatched communicative power. People who initially opposed or doubted you may still resist internally, but externally they listen, and sometimes they even champion your ideas because they feel included in the solution. Mastering this technique doesn't just make you persuasive, it makes you respected. When you can speak so people listen and frame it as mutual benefit, you create allies, diffuse tension, and inspire cooperation, even in environments that once seemed hostile. In the next section, we'll conclude the book by tying all 10 techniques together and showing how to integrate them into a coherent approach to speaking so people truly listen, even your enemies. Conclusion. Throughout this book, you've explored 10 powerful techniques for speaking so people listen, even your enemies. You've learned how to establish credibility, frame your message, spark curiosity, master your voice in silence, make your ideas stick, read the room, transform conflict into connection, use nonverbal presence, tell stories that persuade, and present ideas as mutual wins. Individually, each of these skills has value. Together, they form a system for influence, connection, and respect. The common thread running through all of them is awareness. Awareness of yourself, your message, and your audience. Awareness of how words, tone, gestures, and timing affect perception. Awareness that communication is not about winning arguments but about shaping understanding and building relationships. Every technique you've learned strengthens this awareness and, in turn, strengthens your impact. Practice is essential. None of these skills work magically overnight. They require reflection, rehearsal, and application in real-world situations. Start with one technique, integrate it until it feels natural, and then layer the next. Over time, you'll notice a shift, not only in how others respond to you, but in how confident, clear, and strategic you feel in every conversation. Equally important is intention. Speak with clarity, honesty, and respect. Even when persuading, your goal is not to manipulate, but to guide understanding. When your intent is constructive, your influence is authentic, and even skeptics can recognize it. Remember that influence is a long game. Some people may resist initially. Others may not respond the way you hope. But by consistently applying these techniques, you embed your ideas and presence in the minds of your audience. They begin to anticipate your words, value your insights, and even reconsider their assumptions. You're no longer just another voice. They listen because you've earned it. Speaking so people listen is more than a skill, it's an art. It's a combination of strategy, empathy, presence, and timing. It's about understanding human nature as much as mastering rhetoric. The tools in this book equip you to navigate conversations with authority and grace, influence outcomes ethically, and handle resistance with confidence. Finally, remember this: the true measure of speaking so people listen is connection. When your words resonate, they create understanding, trust, and sometimes even transformation. Your audience may include allies, skeptics, and adversaries, but when you speak with awareness, clarity, and respect, everyone listens. And when they listen, you have the power to make ideas take root, change perspectives, and inspire action. This is the culmination of the journey we've taken together. Now, the next step is yours. Practice, observe, adjust, and continue to refine these techniques. Speak deliberately. Speak strategically. Speak so that people, not just your friends, but even your critics, truly listen. Your voice has power. Use it wisely,